Welcome to today's deep dive. So, what happens when you tear down the walls of your church, throw out the concept of hell, but realize you still fundamentally believe in God?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
Right. And today, our mission is exploring this fascinating grassroots conversation between two men, Steve and Forrest. We're looking at a YouTube discussion where they are actively deconstructing and then reconstructing their faith completely outside of traditional
And
institutions.
the really striking thing here is that they haven't walked away from their belief at all. They've just, walked away from the traditional packaging. We're
Exactly.
unpacking their open debate about the afterlife, the origins of the Bible, and what community actually means when you remove those institutional walls.
Well, the biggest wall they are tearing down is hell. I mean, both men completely reject the mainstream concept of hell as this eternal conscious torment.
Right, because they argue it violates human free will and it creates a totally contradictory picture of a loving God.
Exactly. But this is actually where we see their first major divergence in thought. Right.
Yeah, so Steve leans toward Christian universalism.
Okay, so what does that look like for him?
Well, he believes everyone is eventually reunited with God. So in his view, any concept of hell isn't like literal fire and brimstone.
Yeah.
It's simply the incredibly painful, eye-opening realization of the harm you caused on Earth.
Oh, wow. So it's more psychological.
Exactly. He uses historical atrocities to make the point, suggesting even the worst figures in history would face a crushing awakening of their own evil rather than eternal physical torture.
That makes a lot of sense. But Forrest takes a totally different route, right?
He does. He argues for annihilationism or soul sleep, which is the idea that the soul just simply ceases to exist.
Okay, so if we think about this like parenting, I mean, Steve believes the afterlife is kind of a cosmic timeout, right? Where you're forced to reflect on your wrongs until you learn your lesson.
Right, yeah.
Whereas Forrest believes annihilationism is just, well, turning off the TV entirely. The broadcast just ends.
That's a great analogy. And removing that thread of eternal torment completely changes the motivation for faith. It
Yeah.
shifts the focus from avoiding punishment to actually desiring a relationship with the divine.
But here's my question. If they're throwing out a concept as foundational as hell, they have to justify where they're getting their authority to do so. I mean, how do they look at the Bible and say, well, actually, mainstream religion got this totally wrong?
Well, they trace their theological shift back to linguistics and history. So take the English word hell.
Right.
It's actually a translation of four distinct ancient words, one Hebrew and three Greek. And here's the key. None of them originally meant eternal conscious torment.
Wait, really? None of them?
None of them. For instance, the Greek word Gehenna literally referred to a burning trash dump right outside the walls of ancient Jerusalem, and another word simply translated to the grave.
Okay, wow.
The modern concept of endless torture was largely layered onto the text much later.
I mean, if you grew up seeing the Bible as this definitive sealed rule book, hearing that human translation shifted the meaning so drastically can be, deeply jarring.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when they point out things like the Ethiopian Bible containing 88 books compared to the standard 66 found in most Western Bibles.
Right, because that shows that 5th century political councils had a massive hand in shaping what made the final cut.
Exactly. The canon was heavily curated.
But let me push back on their logic a bit here. Forrest makes this striking observation that the Bible never actually condemns the institution of human slavery, right?
Yes, he does.
And he uses this to argue that the text contains human misinterpretations of God's will. But if they believe the text is that flawed or that easily manipulated by ancient politicians, how do they trust any of it as a spiritual guide?
And that right there is the ultimate tension of deconstruction. For Stephen Forrest, the text isn't a flawless rule book, it's a historical starting point.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, they filter these ancient writings through what they feel is a direct personal spiritual connection. So they're seeking the spirit of the text rather than literal obedience to it.
So without literalist scripture and without a shared terror of hell to bind everyone together, what prevents these believers from just drifting completely apart?
Right. It's a valid question.
I mean, it reminds me of graduating from college. You lose the forced proximity of the classroom, and suddenly you have to figure out if your friend group actually has anything holding it together besides just the institution itself.
That is a really great parallel.
Mm,
And they completely reject what Forrest calls the Constantine model of the modern church.
the Constantine model.
Yeah, so when Emperor Constantine institutionalized Christianity in the 4th century, it shifted from a grassroots living room movement into a state-sponsored religion.
Oh, so it became rigid and hierarchical.
Exactly. Forrest describes the modern result vividly. He says it's just sitting passively in a room, staring at the back of someone's head while a single person speaks at you for an hour.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. So what are they doing instead?
Well, they're seeking Ekklesia, which is an ancient Greek term for a gathering of citizens,
Okay.
but they apply it as small, intimate gatherings focused on sharing meals, sharing their lives, and um, prioritizing people over complex theology.
So it really boils down to a beautifully simple metric for these two, which is just loving God and loving people.
Yeah.
Everything else is a theological rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a profound shift from a compliance-based religion to a connection-based faith.
It really is. Which leaves you with something pretty major to chew on.
Absolutely.
If the institutional structures of your own community or worldview just vanished tomorrow, no formal buildings, no rigid hierarchies, no forced proximity, what would the actual structure underneath look like? What would your grassroots ecclesia be?